I had never noticed how heavy a hotel lobby could feel until that moment, until her presence filled it like sunlight seeping through dusty curtains. She was there behind the counter, not rushing, not expecting me, and yet somehow she had claimed every corner of my attention. Her hands moved over the registration forms with a graceful ease, long fingers brushing the papers, brushing the air, and I imagined them brushing me instead. "Call this your extended stay," she said, her voice low, smooth, a little teasing, but there was an edge I couldn't quite place. A warmth settled in my chest I hadn't anticipated. I looked at her more closely, the faint laugh lines around her eyes, the way her hair caught the soft overhead light, the quiet confidence in the way she shifted her weight. And somewhere beneath that confidence, I thought I glimpsed a flicker of something else, a vulnerability she didn't hand out freely. I cleared my throat, fumbling with my wallet. Thank you," I managed, even though my voice sounded too loud in the sudden quiet. She glanced up then, and that's when it hit me, the small, impossible intimacy of that instant. Our eyes locked, and I wanted to tell her that I had noticed everything about her already, from the faint scent of her perfume, something floral, soft, lingering, to the subtle tilt of her chin that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. But I didn't. I just watched, trapped in the slow orbit of her gaze, my own fingers brushing the counter like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. She slid the key card across to me. Our hands brushed, just lightly, just an instant, but enough. Enough to make me aware of the heat in her touch, the way her palm pressed slightly against mine, like she was testing a boundary either of us wanted to name. I held my breath and stepped back, almost ashamed at the sudden awareness of my own pulse. "Room 402, she said, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Her eyes lingered on me for a beat longer than necessary, and I knew I wasn't imagining the electricity in the space between us. I murmured a thanks again, awkwardly, as if the first wasn't enough. She chuckled softly, a sound that brushed against my ears like silk, and my chest tightened. The world outside the lobby faded, the hum of the air conditioner, the soft footsteps in the hallway, even the muted chatter at the other desks. Nothing existed except the rhythm of her glance, the weight of her presence, the subtle way she seemed to lean into the space around me without actually moving. For a moment, I wanted to ask her something ridiculous, anything that would give me an excuse to stay near her. Instead, I nodded, keycard in hand, and started toward the elevators, feeling her gaze trail me in a way that made my stomach twist. Then, just as I reached for the button, the phone on her counter rang sharply, slicing through the delicate bubble between us. She straightened, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a slight frown, and said, "Excuse me." The spell broke, and yet didn't. I could still feel the trace of her touch on my fingers, still taste the softness in her look, still hear the promise in the quiet tilt of her voice. And as the elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, I realized I hadn't even introduced myself. I didn't know if I wanted to. The room smelled faintly of cedar polish and sunlight that had been trapped behind drawn curtains. I dropped my bag onto the bed and sat on the edge, replaying every detail of our interaction in the lobby. Her laugh, the tilt of her head, the almost imperceptible brush of her hand. I couldn't shake it. She had been a constant presence in my thoughts since I'd stepped through that door, and the weight of it made me self-conscious in a way I hadn't expected. At 22, I had imagined desire as a blunt, careless thing. But this was a slow, insistent pull that refused to be named. And I had no idea how to navigate it. She wasn't just beautiful, she was complete in ways that made me aware of my own gaps. There was a grace in the way she moved, a confidence that hinted at decades of experience, yet in her eyes I caught a shadow of loneliness. I imagined her life beyond the counter. Quiet evenings with a half-read book, a soft regret for roads not taken, a smile reserved for no one but the walls of this hotel. The age difference hovered between us like an unspoken warning. People would talk. It wasn't just the 20-year gap. It was the way I fumbled for words around her, the way she seemed to measure my restraint, the subtle hesitation before she allowed a small, casual closeness. And yet neither of us retreated completely. There was a tacit acknowledgement that this magnetism, however risky, was something we couldn't ignore. Later that evening, she appeared at the door of my room. I had been staring at the pale curtains, trying to make sense of my own racing heart, when there was a soft knock. "Forgot to give you the Wi-Fi code," she said, stepping inside just far enough for her shoulder to brush mine as she handed over a small slip of paper. The brief contact made a shiver crawl up my spine. I forced my gaze down, pretending to read the paper, but I could feel her breath near my ear, warm and quiet, stirring a tension I hadn't tried to name. Thanks," I muttered, fumbling with the words. She smiled, just a twitch of her lips, but it carried a weight of knowing. "You're welcome," she said softly, and lingered in the room a second longer than strictly necessary. I wanted to ask her to stay, but a cautious voice in my head whispered that this was dangerous. And yet I noticed everything. The way her hand brushed the edge of the desk, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the faint scent of jasmine that seemed to cling to her. I realized she had noticed me too, the way my fingers gripped the paper a little too tightly, the slight tremor in my jaw, the stolen glances I thought I had masked. "You're quiet tonight," she murmured, finally stepping back toward the door. Her voice carried the warmth of someone who had seen too much and was careful with what she offered. But as she turned, she paused, just a heartbeat, and our eyes met. A current passed between us, unspoken and undeniable, the air thick with what we weren't saying. Her fingers brushed mine again as she passed, fleeting, accidental, or not. The contact lingered in my skin long after she had left, and I sank onto the bed, heart pounding, mind racing. For a moment, I considered knocking on her door, telling her how her presence had shifted something inside me. But the words tangled, caught in my throat. Instead, I closed my eyes, recalling the warmth of her hand, the whisper of her voice, the subtle, impossible pull that drew me toward her, and knew one thing for certain: we had already begun a story we couldn't quite stop. And in the silence that followed, I felt it, a quiet, urgent promise that the next touch, the next glance, could change everything. The next afternoon, the lobby felt smaller than usual, almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to watch us. I lingered near the elevators, pretending to check my phone, while she sorted some paperwork behind the counter. Every so often, her fingers grazed the edge of the desk, and my chest tightened with each accidental, or deliberate, contact. I was about to step closer when a sharp voice cut through the hum. "Hey, Marlene! You here?" A hotel guest appeared, cheerful and oblivious, and she straightened immediately, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her mask of composure slipping into place. I almost laughed at how quickly she transformed, the subtle tension melting as she responded politely. I stepped back, heart hammering, realizing just how exposed our moments of closeness had become. My gaze lingered on her as she handed a room key to the guest, but she caught it, and her eyes met mine across the counter. There it was again, the quiet pull, the unspoken current that neither of us could name. Later, she came to my room again under the pretense of checking if everything was okay. She leaned slightly over the desk where I had spread out some papers, and our shoulders brushed. The air was heavy, warm, charged. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Our eyes locked, and the space between us seemed impossibly small. I could feel her breath near my cheek as she straightened to hand me a note, and for a heartbeat, I imagined pressing my lips to hers, letting all hesitation fall away. But I didn't. I shifted just enough to maintain the smallest distance, though the pull between us remained, taut and electric. Guilt gnawed at me, about the age gap, the social boundaries, the sheer audacity of what I wanted, but it was drowned out by the undeniable thrill of proximity. She noticed it too. I could see it in the slight parting of her lips, the almost imperceptible tremor of her hands, the way she lingered, as if daring me to step closer yet pulling back at the last moment. It was a delicate dance of desire and restraint, each movement a silent negotiation of risk and temptation. A sudden vibration from my phone startled me, breaking the moment. She glanced at it, then back at me, and a smile flickered, half amusement, half exasperation. The interruption was mundane, yet it felt like an intrusion into something intimate, something fragile. We both laughed softly, the tension easing for a fraction of a second, but the air between us remained electric. I felt her presence press against me as she leaned slightly to retrieve a pen, the scent of her hair and skin enveloping me. The contact was brief, almost innocent, yet it set my pulse racing. When she finally moved to leave, we lingered near the door. Neither of us spoke, but our fingers brushed again, a hesitant, fleeting contact that said more than words ever could. My stomach twisted in anticipation, guilt, and desire all at once. She turned, caught my gaze one last time, and paused. And in that suspended moment, as if the universe held its breath for us, we were closer than ever. Closer than we had any right to be, yet neither of us moved away. The hallway was quiet, the soft carpet muffling my footsteps as I approached her door. I had told myself I was just checking if she needed anything, an excuse as flimsy as the flutter in my chest. But the moment I heard her soft hum through the slightly ajar door, I knew it wasn't about the room service, it was about her. I knocked lightly. "Marlene?" My voice betrayed me, low and uneven. She opened the door just a crack, and the space between us seemed impossibly narrow. Her eyes were wide, a mix of curiosity and caution, and for a heartbeat, the entire world contracted to the warmth radiating from her. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, the way a stray lock of hair fell across her cheek, and my hand itched to brush it away, just to feel the softness of her skin against my fingers. "Can I come in?" I asked, even though the answer seemed obvious. She hesitated, then stepped aside, letting me enter. The air in the room was thick, charged, heavy with the unspoken. I could feel her body shift closer as I crossed the threshold, the faint brush of her arm against mine sending a jolt through my chest. My mind raced, every caution, every boundary, every societal rule screamed at me, but my body betrayed me. I don't know why I keep thinking about this," I confessed, my voice low, almost trembling. "About you. About us." Her breath hitched slightly. She didn't speak at first, just tilted her head as if measuring the weight of my words. Then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned a fraction closer, and I felt the warmth of her shoulder brush mine. My fingers itched to reach for her, to trace the curve of her jaw, to lean in, but I held myself back, caught between desire and restraint. "I shouldn't," she whispered, voice fragile yet steady. "But I can't stop noticing you either." The admission hung in the air like a spark over dry wood. My pulse surged, my fingers trembling despite myself. I stepped closer, just enough that our chests nearly touched, the heat between us a tangible presence. Her eyes searched mine, and I read the same mixture of longing and fear that twisted inside me. I reached up instinctively, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The motion was slow, deliberate, intimate. She shivered under my touch, eyes fluttering closed for a fraction of a second, and I cursed the electricity that surged through me. "You're dangerous," she murmured, voice low, almost a plea. "And I can't." "Can't what?" I asked softly, my lips so close to hers that I could feel the warmth of her breath. Her hands pressed lightly against my chest, halting me for a heartbeat, yet she didn't push away. The tension was unbearable, a taut line stretched to its breaking point. My heart pounded in my ears, and I could feel her pulse, quick and uneven, against my fingers. And then the world narrowed to that one instant, our faces inches apart, breath mingling, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. I leaned in, slow, almost reverent, and her eyes fluttered closed. A sharp sound, a keycard sliding in the door, made us jerk apart, the spell breaking. She stepped back, lips parted, chest rising and falling, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else I couldn't name. And in that suspended moment, I knew everything had changed. One step closer, and the line we had danced around would vanish forever. I didn't hear her arrive. I only felt the sudden shift in the air, the subtle change in temperature as she stepped closer. My back was against the wall, and I could sense her presence before I even looked up. "You!" She started, voice tight, but then faltered, the words trapped somewhere between caution and confession. I looked at her, taking in the way her fingers twisted a loose strand of hair, the barely perceptible tremble in her hands, and I knew she was about to say something that would change everything. I wasn't completely honest, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. About how long I've noticed you. About why I asked you to stay here. I felt my stomach drop. My pulse raced, a mix of fear and exhilaration. She had known. All this time. And I had been pretending to be casual, pretending I hadn't memorized the curve of her smile, the tilt of her head, the warmth in her presence that made everything else fade. I thought it was safer to keep it professional, she continued, stepping closer until her shoulder brushed mine. My body reacted before my mind could catch up, a shiver, a tightening grip on the edge of the counter, a breath caught mid-thought. Professional? I echoed, voice rough, betraying more than I intended. The word hung between us, fragile, meaningless. Every inch between us carried weight, the small gap that felt like the world, the electricity that neither of us could ignore. Yes, she said, lips parted, eyes darting away for just a second before snapping back to mine. But now I realize maybe I don't want it to be safe. The words hit me like a current, and I felt it in every nerve, in the heat pooling in my chest, the ache in my fingers, the almost painful awareness of her proximity. She leaned just a fraction closer, the air from her breath brushing my cheek. I wanted to close the distance completely, to let go of restraint entirely, but a voice in my head whispered of consequences, judgment, the impossible nature of what I wanted. Yet I couldn't step back. My hands itched to reach for her, to trace her face, to anchor myself in the warmth that radiated from her. Every micro-movement was loaded, her shoulder brushing mine as she adjusted a stack of papers, the way she tilted her head toward me, the subtle shiver that ran down her spine as our hands accidentally touched. I began, but the words failed me. My throat was too tight, my heartbeat deafening. I only knew that if I didn't act, if I didn't let her know what I felt, I'd regret it forever. She stepped even closer, the space between us almost vanished. I could feel the heat of her body, the scent of her hair, the subtle pulse at her wrist as she adjusted the papers she held. Our fingers brushed, again and again, fleeting touches that set everything inside me on fire. I've wanted to tell you, she murmured, voice trembling now. Every day, but I was afraid. Fear, desire, and an ache of longing collided. My own breath hitched as I swallowed hard. I wanted to confess everything, to let her see the obsession, the thinking, the ache that she had stirred in me, but the world outside our room still existed, with rules, consequences, judgment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she pressed a hand lightly against my chest. I felt her warmth through the thin fabric of my shirt, and it anchored me, daring me, pulling me forward even as my mind screamed caution. I wanted her closer. I wanted to ignore everything else. And in that charged silence, the choice became clear. I could step back, let fear dictate the next move, or I could step forward and risk everything. I leaned just a fraction closer, and she met me halfway. Our breaths mingled. Fingers tangled. The world outside stopped. And then, there was a pause, electric and endless, before we could decide if this was finally the moment everything would change. The room felt smaller than ever, every sound amplified, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the subtle scrape of her shoe against the carpet, the almost imperceptible intake of breath between us. I could feel her presence like gravity, pulling me toward her, and I knew that one wrong move, or one right move, could shatter everything. We were inches apart, shoulders nearly touching, faces close enough to catch each other's breath. My hands hovered, unsure whether to rest them on her arms, her waist, or somewhere I wouldn't betray the tension that had built between us for days. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, giving me room and daring me all at once. I started, then swallowed, heart hammering. Words felt insufficient. I don't want to lose this. Lose you. Her gaze softened, a fragile, almost desperate warmth that mirrored the storm inside me. I don't want that either, she whispered, voice trembling slightly, the edge of hesitation still there, but thinning. She stepped just a fraction closer, and I could feel the subtle heat radiating from her body, the brush of her arm against mine. My pulse leapt at the contact, and every nerve ending seemed to hum. The air between us was electric, thick with the weight of everything unsaid, the longing, the fear, the guilt, the desire. I could smell the faint floral notes in her hair, feel the tension in her shoulders, hear the rapid rise and fall of her breath. I wanted to close the distance completely, to let my lips brush hers, to let the world fall away, but I didn't want to frighten her. Not yet. She reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from my forehead, her fingers lingering just a moment too long. That single touch, light, careful, intimate, was enough to undo the walls I had built. I leaned into it instinctively, closing the fraction of space that remained between us. "I'm not sure if this is right," she murmured, voice low, almost a confession, almost a warning. "Does it feel wrong?" I asked, whispering back, even as my chest pressed lightly against hers, even as my hands trembled with anticipation. Her lips parted, the faintest hitch in her breath answering my unspoken question. The world outside ceased to exist. The hotel, the lobby, the rules, the age gap, all of it disappeared, leaving only the heat, the tension, the impossible pull that had been building since the day we met. I rested my forehead against hers, feeling the rapid beat of her pulse, the softness of her cheeks against mine. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, meeting my gaze with something I hadn't seen before: complete understanding, mirrored longing, a quiet surrender to the truth between us. "I want this," she whispered, almost shyly, but with a firmness that shook me. "I don't want to fight it anymore." I exhaled slowly, relief and desire tangled into one, and pressed just a fraction closer. Our hands found each other naturally, fingers interlacing, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. Every breath we shared, every heartbeat, was an acknowledgement that this, whatever it was real, messy, human, and ours. In that room, in that suspended moment, we didn't need words. We understood each other fully, for the first time, completely. And even if the world outside judged, even if tomorrow demanded restraint, we had this, a truth we had chosen, together. And for now, that was enough. The morning light seeped through the curtains, soft and forgiving, brushing the room in pale gold. I was sitting on the edge of the bed when she appeared, barefoot, hair loosely gathered, eyes still carrying the weight of yesterday's confessions and the quiet triumph of choice. We didn't speak at first. Words felt unnecessary. She settled beside me, shoulder brushing mine, fingers finding mine without hesitation. The small, deliberate interlacing of our hands said everything that had been building for weeks: trust, desire, acceptance. "I was afraid," she murmured after a moment, resting her head lightly against my shoulder. "Of losing control, of doing something reckless." I tightened my grip just slightly, a silent reassurance. "And now?" I asked, voice low, almost teasing, though there was sincerity beneath it. "No," she said, lifting her face so our foreheads touched. "I'm not afraid of you." I laughed softly, a sound mingling relief and wonder. The age gap, the whispered judgments, the caution that had shadowed every glance and brush of skin, it didn't matter here. Not in this room, not in this quiet morning, not in the delicate orbit we had created for each other. Her lips brushed mine lightly, almost a question, almost a promise. I met it, slow, unhurried, savoring the warmth, the softness, the long-held restraint finally given release. My hands cupped her face gently, thumb brushing across her cheek, and she shivered just enough to make me smile against her lips. We leaned into each other, a long embrace that settled all lingering doubts, a hug that spoke of more than desire, of connection, understanding, and the fragile courage it had taken to arrive here. She pressed her cheek against mine, and I felt the steady beat of her heart, a rhythm that matched my own in perfect, messy synchronicity. "I guess we should get used to this," she whispered, voice teasing but tender, her fingers still entwined with mine. I nodded, brushing a soft kiss against her temple. "I think I could get used to anything with you." The moment lingered, unhurried, a slow exhale after weeks of tension, longing, hesitation, and nearly crossed lines. The sunlight warmed the room, casting gentle shadows that mirrored the curves and edges of our closeness. No one else mattered here, not age, not rules, not fear. Just us, together, present in a truth we had fought to embrace. We sat there for a long while, hands intertwined, foreheads touching, letting the quiet hum of the hotel morning settle around us. And for the first time, everything felt possible, not because the world had changed, but because we had chosen each other, fully, messily, humanly. And as she leaned against me, soft and confident in equal measure, I realized that this slow, careful surrender, was what I had been waiting for all along. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?